We're talking with a former PMEA district, region, and all-state participant that's now on Broadway on today's PMEA's Take Note podcast. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this edition of PMEA's Take Note podcast. My name is Mark Despotakis, and today we are talking. We'll call it from PMEA to Broadway. We don't normally theme the shows, but that's I think what we'll call it today. We're really excited to have with us, and I'll bring her in now, Kelsee Kimmel. And Kelsee has been part of the Crescendo Student Conference, I think twice now. And we thought let's bring her into the podcast audience as well. Kelsee, thanks for being with us.
Of course, thanks for having me.
So I think it's easier for you to tell us kind of the elevator speech about yourself, and maybe like let's go with that theme of from PMEA to Broadway. Like if go back in time, tell us your musical career, your career starting in the performing arts through PMEA to kind of what you're doing now.
Yeah, absolutely. So like Mark said, my name is Kelsee Kimmel. I grew up in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and well, I guess Pennsylvania is a given. We're in the PMEA umbrella, but I started performing. The first time I ever performed was through my local dance studio when I was very, very small. And from there, my love for all things arts and everything just kind of blossomed. And I had really, really wonderful, supportive family members and good exposure to the arts and everything around me, which was just amazing. It's so important to expose young people to all things creative. And I was no exception. And I was just bitten by all sorts of bugs from, piano lessons when I was a young girl and dancing. And I didn't do my first musical, though, until I got to high school. And high school was really super formative for me, and PMEA was a huge part of that. My choir director in high school was a huge part of that. Her name is Amy Bergdorf. And Mrs. Bergdorf challenged me, pushed me, disciplined and reprimanded me, pushed me in ways that I didn't quite understand as a teenager, but that I'm so thankful for as an adult. And PMEA was a huge part of that because there's so much discipline involved, I found. And I'm sure anyone who's done any of the festivals can find. There's so much practice and preparation and, a type of necessary execution needed just like in the audition process for the festivals. And I did district, regional, and all-state choir my junior and senior year of high school. And I already kind of knew by the time I was involved in PMEA that I wanted to do this, that I wanted to study musical theater in college and pursue a career in New York City, going after, a Broadway dream. And so by the time I was doing my PMEA festivals my senior year, I believe I would have already, if I wasn't absolutely committed, I would have already had a pretty good idea that I was going to college for musical theater. I went to Shenandoah Conservatory, which is a BFA program in Winchester, Virginia. And I remember that time at my senior year specifically. I remember it as just being so busy, exhausting, chaotic, because I was in the middle of, I still did like county chorus, and I was preparing for districts and regionals and all states. I was in the middle of college auditions as a prospective musical theater student. So that meant preparing songs and monologues and a repertoire book that I was bringing with me and traveling to all of these colleges and universities and doing audition days on campus. And I was also, there were just other like senior year kind of brings up other like celebratory performance opportunities that I got to enjoy throughout the mid-state area. And I was also doing the spring musical that year. And I just remember kind of feeling, I was 17, feeling like I was being pushed to my absolute limit, but there was something so fulfilling about it. And I think that's like the biggest tie-in for me when we're talking about PMEA to Broadway is it is exhausting. It's not always the most fun, but there is a reward, and that's what I absolutely loved about it and still love to this day. And, when it came to my path kind of to Broadway post college, when I moved to New York City almost 10 years ago. And, in pursuing this, it takes just so much consistency and patience and preparation and yes, talent and like any industry connections and knowing people and kind of having an in and building a network. But you're not just like with PMEA, if you're not prepared at the audition, if you don't know the material, if you are bringing down your section because you're not prepared when it comes time to rehearse and go into the actual festival performance, it's not going to feel great. It's not going to be very successful. You're probably not going to like it as much. It's not going to be a good experience. And that discipline that I had instilled in me from Mrs. Bergdorf and throughout an experience like PMEA is something that I really, really proudly, seriously carry with me still.
So let's, we love to hear that, of course. But so let's talk a little bit about like actually this path to Broadway. Like, we've talked when you've been on Crescendo, like about this romanticized version of like what happens when you go into show business, if you will, and when you go to Broadway. And but you just outlined some pieces of the puzzle here. But I want you to maybe dissect that a little bit more for us. Like the broad question is, what does it take to get to Broadway? But I think it's like, what are the skills that you've learned over that time? And I would guess, and I could be wrong, but I would guess a lot of that you learned post college, like actually being in New York and just living in that space. What are those skill sets? And even then, like, what is the mindset that you have to have to be there and going for work in this space?
Yeah, this is great. I mean, I always compare, not, I shouldn't say I always compare. There's an easy allegory to be made between, say, like what we do as artists and performers, to say like a law student or someone going through medical school. If you're comparing those two paths, they're very hard and rigorous, and it takes a lot of training and a lot of time and a lot of desire to like figure things out. But the difference is when you talk about, learning post school, to be on Broadway, you don't need a degree. To make an album, to record an album and go on tour, you don't need a degree. Sure, there are things that you need to know, tools of the trade wise, but it's not like, okay, I went through, all my years of medical school and I did a residency and now I'm ready to be a doctor. Or now, I passed the bar and now I'm a lawyer. You don't need that piece of paper. And, lots of people choose to. I chose to and loved it. Some people don't. And it's like, we all have a right to try. But with that comes a lot of maintenance and continued learning and continuing to be a student post, graduation, post being a full-time student from high school or from college or both. And I'd say like there is so much on the job day-to-day learning to be had and figuring out, when I first moved and I didn't have a job and I didn't have an agent and I was kind of figuring things out a little bit on my own. Again, I had a network, I had a great education and, I felt set up, I felt prepared artistically, but then, I'd made the move to New York City and it's like, okay, talk about being a small fish in a very, very, very big pond. This is where like everything happens in the musical theater industry and, showing up to auditions and kind of figuring out how auditions work. And there's a pecking order to like how you sign up and when you're seen. And it's all very, very nauseating. And, just again, kind of like the patience and the drive to see that through. It is not for the faint of heart. It involves, I would say, a little bit of insanity. By definition, insanity is trying the same thing over and over and over again, hoping for a different outcome. And that is quite literally what my life was for several years after I graduated. It was like, well, I went to that open call or I went to that audition and I haven't heard anything, but I'm going to keep going. And it might take dozens upon dozens upon dozens, 100+ times. But one day it's going to be like, you know what, Kelsee, we've seen her a lot. She comes in, she's prepared, she shows up, she's patient, she's talented, she's right for something that we have here. Let's figure out what it is. And once that first branch kind of breaks, it's it's easier to keep climbing. And it just like something has to give, and eventually something gave, and that was a total testament to just like devoting myself to seeing this thing for myself and devoting myself to making it happen. But the mindset part of it is huge. It is absolutely huge. You have to be prepared that it might not happen overnight. It normally doesn't happen overnight. And like you said, we hear so many like romanticized versions of like, oh my gosh, overnight success. And even in like the commercial music industry, you hear about people, we have people like Lizzo and Sabrina Carpenter and people who all of a sudden it's like this huge boom of like, whoa, this person is everywhere. Where did they come from? Those people were making albums and pounding the pavement for years and years and years and years. And now all of a sudden there's a commercial success involved and now everyone's talking about it, but that doesn't mean that it just happened overnight. And it's very, very similar in the musical theater world. It's very rare that someone graduates from college or moves to the city and immediately has a huge break. It's not normally that easy, for lack of a better term. There's still difficulties that are involved for people who that happens for, but it really, really takes a lot of patience, resilience, preparedness. It's just like that's what you really have to hit home. And what I love so much about tying in the PMEA to Broadway thing, because again, like if you're not prepared, it's not going to happen and people aren't going to trust you. And, whenever I talk to friends in casting, it's just like there's so much admiration for people who are on the casting side or on the creative side of things who are sitting on the other side of the table, as we say. When you go into the audition, you're standing and you're in the room, and then there are people behind the table kind of adjudicating. And there's so much respect and admiration to be had from their point of view, when it's just like, wow, we know that this person is going to make us look good because we've called them in to show to the creative team for this project. And, no matter what happens, if they crack, if they forget a line, so what? If they're prepared and they're ready to work, that's the kind of stuff that matters in terms of the long run.
Yeah. So let me follow up just on a piece of this. So you talked about the dozens and dozens of times that maybe it was hundreds of times.
Yeah.
I think there's some lesson in there for all of us, because all of us are going to have, maybe not going for Broadway, but are going to have something in that space. I'm just really curious for you in that time frame, when you didn't know if you were going to be where you are now. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can talk now about resilience. You can look back and say, I had this resilience. But I'm wondering if you can remember in those moments, maybe like I'm trying to dig into your psyche or something here without being your therapist, but like, I'm just curious, like, well, in those moments that we all have, what was it that kept you going? Was it that drive because like you knew you wanted to do this, or how did you keep going after every one of those dozens or whatever the number was?
Yeah, there, on the psyche part of it, there is, I would say, kind of like a no quit gene that I must have, and that people who follow similar paths to me must have. And I don't know, I think there was just a big part of me that was, I mean, truly it's based in love for this. I love this so much, and I didn't see myself doing anything else. When I that's actually pretty key. When I first went to college, on my first day, it was like we had move-in day, and then the next day we had like a welcome week. And so move-in day was on a Monday, and on Tuesday we started orientations through the conservatory. And the theater department chair of Shenandoah University at the time stood in front of the entire theater department incoming class. That we were all freshmen, we were all there together. It was acting students and musical theater students and arts management students and technical design students. And he stood in front of all of us and he said, if there is anything else you see yourself doing, you need to go do that thing. And I was 18 years old. I was starting my freshman year in college. I was appalled that this man was standing in front of an entire department of incoming, excited, dreamy, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed students and said this to us. I literally was like, what? Like, we're all here to learn. We're all here to do the thing. We're all here because we clearly want to be, and we worked hard to get here, right? And then by the time I graduated from school and was certainly in the city, for a little bit, doing facing the reality of what this was, I realized that was the most sound thing that anyone could have said to us. And so I now say it to young people. It's just like, if there is anything else that you are interested in, if there's anything else that fulfills you, that you want to learn more about, that you think you could be good at, you need to chase that thing, because that's how hard this is. I'm only going to speak about, pursuing a career in musical theater performance, Broadway, dreams, like I said before, because that's my area of expertise. But so there was something about that, like, in my psyche, there was something about saying, announcing to like the world and, the people who cared about me in my life, like, okay, well, I'm going to college for musical theater. I'm going to get a Bachelor of Fine Arts in musical theater, and I'm going to graduate, and then I'm going to move to the city, and I'm going to lease an apartment with some roommates, and I'm going to spend my days showing up to open calls. Maybe I won't even be seen. Maybe they won't even have time to see me that day. Sometimes I'll go to an audition and I won't do anything. Sometimes I'll go to an audition and they won't look up from the table. Sometimes I'll go to an audition and they'll say, thanks so much, and I'll never hear from them again. And there is just something about the commitment to myself, both internally and publicly, that was just like, well, I'm in this. Like, I have chosen to do this, so I'm going to follow it through. And I did, truth be told, I did always see it for myself. I really, I believed, again, like, keeping that professor's words in mind, like, there just was nothing else that I saw myself doing. I remember one time I was asked by a family member, as I was kind of like choosing what I wanted to do in college, well, like, do you want to minor in something, or do you want to have like a plan B? And at 17 or 18 years old, I had the wherewithal and the confidence to say, well, no, I don't want to pick a plan B, because if I pick a plan B, then that means that I don't intend for my plan A to work out. And I want to go full force, full steam ahead, knowing, believing, accepting that my plan A is going to happen. And so I think, like you said, now I can look back and say, yeah, I was resilient, and look where it landed me. Amazing. I'm on Broadway. But I think that there was a knowing of my own resilience then as well, because I just, and again, I know that there's a lot of fortune and privilege, and I have a wonderful support system, and my mom has always been there to help me in whatever way I've needed. But when it comes to like supporting myself as an adult, living in the world and finances and everything, like, I have been able to work and support myself with performing jobs. So that was also a thing, even before like the big Broadway break came, there was still, I was on national tours for a while. I worked on a cruise ship. My first big contract out of college, I was traveling and performing on a cruise ship. And that was amazing, because I got to see the world, and I got to build up like a lot of financial security for myself. And that was an experience I would not have traded for anything. But there are ways to kind of make that happen, so that the resilience can like last longer, if that makes sense. It's not like you can't just like run yourself into the ground and burn yourself out. But again, I do think that there is when I come back to that word insanity, like, there is a little bit of like, well, I'm gonna keep trying, and one day it's gonna happen, because I had that locked in to my brain.
Yeah. Okay, fascinating. Well, you mentioned the national tour stuff. We're going to come back to that in a second, and I just want to comment about the cruise ship stuff. I've heard so many people who go into this space who either do exactly what you did and said this was awesome and this helped me in so many ways, just experience financially.
Yeah.
But then I also hear this other camp of I'm not going to go do that because I don't see a direct path. Well, I've heard so many people who say it's a direct path. I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah, you mean with the cruise ship industry?
Yeah.
Yeah, yes and no. I think there's validity to both, and again, it just has a lot to do with what you kind of like want out of it. When I graduated from college, I knew that I really, really wanted to see the world. I really, really wanted to travel, and being like traveling as connected to work just seemed like amazing. I was like,
Yeah.
absolutely, any opportunity that um that allowed me to do that, I was like, sign me up. Where do I like how do I do that? And so I really, really wanted to tour. I really wanted to do a national tour of a Broadway show, in the United States and, North America, whatever route was happening. And I really, really wanted to do a cruise ship. I thought that sounded awesome.
Yeah.
And, cruise ship jobs famously pay very, very well. And you're really taking care of it. It's like the cushiest job I've ever had because you're put up in a cabin on board. You eat for free. You have no expenses. Um, and then you just get to like perform at night. And then you wake up one day and you're in Sydney, Australia. And then, sometimes you're in Alaska and sometimes like,
Yeah.
it's amazing. And, I'm really glad that I did it at the time that I did because it just was very, very freeing and developmental for me as a human. But in terms of it being like, a bridge or like a stepping stone, I I don't know. I guess like it depends on what kind of contract you're doing and who's
Mhm.
involved with like the hiring process. Sometimes there are abridged versions of musicals done on cruise ships, and sometimes the creative teams of those shows that are done on the cruise ships are the
Oh,
same people who worked on them on Broadway. So, in that kind of a case, that's not what I did.
yeah.
But if I had, there very easily could have been a bridge of like, oh my gosh, there's this person who's doing, Grease on Royal Caribbean right now, and we love her, and we want to bring her in for this project that we're working on in New York. I'm certain that that exists, but the nature of what I was doing, not so much. I wasn't really doing it as like a direct professional stepping stone. It was more so I'm treating this as a stepping stone because I want to see the world. I want to save up money, which this is allowing me to do in a really, really, really amazing way. And I'm still getting to perform at night. Like I'm still
Mhm.
getting to like do the thing to audiences all over the world. Which was fulfilling. And even though it wasn't like the I'm on a Broadway stage in New York City big dream yet. So yeah, it's just and sometimes people are like, I'm not interested in cruising at all. Boats freak me out. Great. Don't do it. But for me, it was really, really intriguing and like gave me from the time I was, 22, 23 years old out of college, gave me financial stability. And that is worth its weight
Right.
in the literal gold.
Right.
If we're talking about currency, but yeah, that was what that gave me.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to come back to the piece after that, the national tour stuff in a
Yeah.
second. But I want to continue the psychiatry of Kelsee here for a minute. So that was just fascinating to me to hear about that. The audition process and what your mindset was there. But something we touched upon briefly again, going back to Crescendo, was another thing that I think all of us deal with in some way is imposter syndrome.
Mhm.
So after those dozens, whatever hundreds, sorry, I keep quoting the numbers, but
Yeah.
once you then like you're getting jobs, you're getting work on obviously a consistent basis because you've done national tours, you've been on in Broadway shows. So, there's a lot of it in the performing arts,
Yeah.
the imposter syndrome. I'm guessing you've had it because I think
Yes.
we all have. Um, what is that like for you? What is that? How do you manage that?
Yeah. Um, well, again, I come back to my support system and the people in my life that I surround myself with. That is so key. Um, and, it's kind of like you are what you eat, like you are the air that you breathe. And the people who you surround yourself with is huge in that. Um, and so I always like reference my village, like my village is everything and I love them. And yeah, the imposter syndrome of it all, I said in crescendo, like it never goes away, and I don't intend that to sound scary or intimidating. I mean it more so as like whenever you are experiencing it, no matter where you are in your life or career, you are not alone. Everyone else in the room either is currently experiencing it or is very familiar with it. And I think in the arts it has a lot to do with it's a very competitive field, obviously. That goes without saying. So it's just kind of like when you get an opportunity, it's kind of like, am I really the one? Like, did they really choose me and they meant to choose me and they didn't mean to choose that other person who's also extremely talented and has worked so hard and has XYZ credits and could have done this job really, really well too? Did they really mean me? That's kind of one place that it comes from. It's like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, it's me and now I have to do it, and like, am I good enough, and are people going to like be okay with the product that I'm now going to create and sell? And then another part of it is that art, any kind of art really, whether you're painting or you're acting or you're singing, certainly it's like it's this really, really delicate thing inside of us that is invisible until we literally put it out
Right.
there. And that is so it's just so delicate, it's so fragile and intimate and tender. And so there's always that the artistic part of our brains that's like, is this good enough? Is it good enough for me? Is it good enough for the people around me who I'm making this thing with? Is it good enough for the people who are in the audience, buying it? Like that is kind of what it is. It's like it's not a math equation where it's like you sit down and you go through the order of operations and it comes out the way that it's meant to come out because of physics or something crazy like that. I literally never took physics, so I don't know if that metaphor works. But it's not, there's no formula. And so when we're just kind of, and like, especially when it comes to singing, it's like, even comparing it to another kind of instrument, like it's not black and white keys in front of you where you're making shapes with your fingers. And when you hit a chord, it sounds right or wrong. It's like this invisible thing that we can't see out here that's working for us in here. And I'm relying on my body and ear and vocal folds to create a sound. And so that's kind of the thing that like never goes away. And I think in terms of overcoming it, I've learned a lot about, I've had a lot of people who I've worked for and worked with tell me and reassure me, like, you are here for a reason. And whenever that voice enters your head of like, wait, why me? Is this real? Did I actually get this? Was it meant to be someone else? No, it was meant to be you. It was meant to be you. And kind of telling yourself that until you believe it is really, really key. But I the good and the bad of it is that I don't think it ever really goes away because, as we continue to create, there's always going to be that like artistic doubt of like, is this right? Is this good? Is this, honoring myself and the piece or, whatever you're working on.
Yeah. That's a lot, and that's
Yeah.
I appreciate you thinking through that and talking about that. Very helpful. And I'll say this, so we'll end the therapy session part of talking to Kelsee. Now I want to go into like a little more kind of fun stuff that people might be interested in. So you've been on some national tours, and people might see like something's in their town,
Yeah.
and they kind of just take for granted that this thing happens, right? Like, but all of the, there was a Wicked's in town here in Pittsburgh right now, and it was a big to do.
Yes.
And there were all these news stories about, and I really appreciated showing all of the behind the scenes of the trucks rolling in.
Yeah.
And they interviewed all of the behind the scenes people, and like, what does this really take? And I really appreciated that local news did that, to talk about all of the careers that go on in this. But I'm curious then, because that really upped my thought process on this, of like, what is that like? What is it like to go on a tour? Like, what is your day to day? How much, like, is that a different level of stamina that you need for something like that than when you're on Broadway? What's that experience like?
Yeah. Well, I'll start by saying what I think is so miraculous about touring in general, aside from like the business model that the producers have ingeniously figured out, because it's another way for them to make money off of their show that's not just running in New York City, is that when you're bringing something across the literal country, like across the United States of America, which is so vast, you're bringing it to audiences who wouldn't maybe necessarily be able to make it to New York City. So you have New York City, where it's like, this is the hub this is where Broadway exists, right? This is where Broadway physically exists. And if it weren't for the age of social media, people who didn't live in New York City would probably not know about any of the shows happening. You think back to maybe like when Broadway, like the vaudeville times of like, the early 1900s. And it's like, it was just like word of mouth. It was local newspapers. It was like, if you were in the industry, great, you were in the industry and you were known for that. But when it comes to national tours, you're literally bringing this production that exists in New York City and was built to run in New York City to audiences everywhere, so that people in Pittsburgh, in California, in Idaho, in New Mexico can experience it too. And so that is just like really, really special, because it allows them to experience this thing, and we can spread the piece of art. But the thing that I think sometimes audience members don't always understand, and maybe like you kind of touched on this when you said like, maybe, people don't always realize like how big of a deal it is when a show comes to town, to the Benedum Center in Pittsburgh, is that is a replica. It's an exact replica of the show that is running on Broadway, or that has run on Broadway and maybe closed, and now the tour is just running. And that means that, the same people who make it happen, the same creative team of Wicked on Broadway, the same directing team and the same costume design team, and it's the same people making it happen. So you are getting the same exact caliber of talent, of product, the same costumes, the same set. I mean, things are going to be modified. Wicked, certainly, as an example, is huge. Like the way that it runs on Broadway is huge. And so there are things that are like cut and modified, but all in all, you're getting the same show, and you're getting, the people who are doing it on stage, the people you go to watch do it, perform it, have gone through the same exact audition process and rehearsal process as the people who are doing it on Broadway. So like, we have, when it comes to national tours, it's kind of like, oh, but is that kind of like subpar? And it's like, sure, maybe in terms of not even exposure though, because again, you're bringing it around the country. More people are seeing you, arguably, but it's like Broadway is on this like pedestal because it's the thing in New York City. But it really is. It really is so like exact. So that's the really, really cool thing. But then when it comes to the day to day, yes, I do think it requires more of your stamina, because when you're on, right now I'm in a Broadway show and I'm in my apartment right now, and I woke up here and I'll go to the theater tonight and I'll do my show, and I'll come back here tonight and I'll go to sleep in my bed with all of my things. And that's my day to day. When you're on tour, not so much. You're moving around. And there are, it depends, tours are different depending on their route. Depending on how much they move. I've done a lot. I've done 4 national tours, all of varying kind of levels of ease. I've done one-nighter tours, which means you're literally doing a show in a city one night.
Oh, wow.
And you're going to sleep in a hotel, and then you're waking up at 7 a.m. to get on the bus and drive to the next city, and then you're doing show in that city, and then you're sleeping in the hotel, waking up at 7, going to the net. Like that is crazy, but that is a thing that exists. A tour like Wicked, a tour like the most recent 2 tours that I did Pretty Woman the musical and 6 on tour, and those schedules were much nicer and easier. But sometimes, you'll still be in a city for, say you're in a city for a week. So, you're going through that day to day of like, okay, you're waking up in either a hotel or an Airbnb or, whatever kind of accommodations that you've either set up for yourself or you've been able to set up with the help of the team. Again, it just kind of varies depending on the contract and like where you are and what your preference is. If you are fine with a hotel, if you prefer to have a kitchen with an Airbnb situation, you then still have to move to the next city on your day off. So when it comes to stamina, it's like, okay, I'm here in this, say we're in Pittsburgh for a week. Well, on Monday, we're gonna have to bus out to Cincinnati or wherever the next town is. And sometimes tour routes make sense like that, and sometimes they really don't. And sometimes you're going from Pittsburgh to Los Angeles or Albuquerque or, something further that requires an airport and a plane and TSA and like all of that stressful stuff. So you don't really get the experience of like day off recuperation that you might have the luxury of getting from just being in one place full time. Like I currently am, just speaking to my current experience of being in New York on Broadway in a stationary production. But shows like there are shows that exist like Wicked, like Hamilton, the sort of like big shows that you hear about that are touring. They'll sit in places for a couple of weeks, and that's for a couple of reasons. A, people want to see it. So, when it comes to supply and demand, there's a market that can the market can sustain a run that might be like 3 or 4 weeks long, versus just 1 week or a couple of nights or one night. And also the set, again, just using Wicked as an example, since you mentioned it being there in Pittsburgh, the set is so massive that when you mention like the trucks rolling in and everything, the crew's job is to unload all of the equipment, the set, all of the sound equipment, the costumes, everything, get it into the theater. And that obviously takes time. So it's just kind of like, how can we make this work in the most non-exhaustive way possible, and let it kind of sit here for a second until, in 3 or 4 weeks time, we'll pack it all up and we'll do it again. Moving Wicked every week would be really, really cruel to the wonderful, fine crew people who make that happen on top of, whatever the actors are experiencing stamina wise and vocally and rest and all of that stuff.
Yeah. Oh, fascinating. That's I'm fascinated by that.
That's kind of sorry to give like the broad strokes.
No,
like I said, everything is kind of when I did Kinky Boots and Rent. I did both of those pre-pandemic, and those were the ones that there were some one-nighter. There were sometimes like week-long sits, but sometimes you're moving every day, and so that obviously affects your day-to-day, because you might be sitting on a literal bus for hours on end.
I didn't realize that was a thing.
Yeah, and then you go do a show, and like. Yeah, so that it depends on what kind of contract you're on, what kind of how often it's moving and stuff like that. But
so say you're in a situation where it's a show that's in town for a week or two and then goes somewhere else, it's a week or two. You talked about like the travel day and stuff, and you even talked about the hotel piece. Like are you responsible for figuring out that piece of the puzzle, or is that done through the show?
So it's kind of dealer's choice. You can, if you are interested there, it depends on, again, like the kind of person you are. I've worked with people who are like, I don't want to think about it. I will take the company, there's a company flight option and a company hotel option. And that's what I want to do. I don't even want to think about it. I just want to be able to like get to the place and check into the hotel and go to the theater, whatever. I am the kind of person who likes to kind of like explore the options a little bit. So, there will always be like, say you'll take the company flight. Great. If you don't want to take the company flight, if you maybe want to take a different flight, or maybe you want to drive, maybe there's a situation where you have a car or, whatever. Maybe you have to pop home for a day for an audition or something, and you're going to meet them in the new city on a different day. You can take a flight buyout. So basically then the company will provide the amount of money that that flight would have cost, and you can use that money to do your own thing. And it kind of works. Again, it's different depending on what kind of contract you're on and the business of it all. The same thing kind of happens with housing. So there will typically always be a provided, producers are responsible for, because they're sending you to a place to work where you do not live. You are either provided, a company housing option that they will cover, or you're given a per diem that's a sum of money on top of your salary, separate from your salary, to help you make the best decision for you. So that's what I mean, where it's kind of like yes and no. Like, yes, they're taking care of you if you want them to take care of you. But if you're like, no, I'm good, I have this other thing, or maybe you're going to a place, close to your hometown or whatever, and you want to stay with family or friends, or whatever, people do that too, and then you just kind of get to like pocket the per diem and save the money. That's kind of a perk of tour too. But yeah, I also, I'm a person who I love to cook. I love to be in kind of control of like creating my meals and all of that stuff. So having a kitchen when I'm on tour is kind of a must for me, for just my physical and mental health. And sometimes a hotel is the best option, and like if I'm there for a week, okay, fine, we'll forego the kitchen need. But for the most part, taking the buyout, if you have the capacity to take the buyout and look at what maybe Airbnb options or corporate housing options or whatever exist, could be worth it too.
Yeah. This is fascinating. This is like,
it's a whole world. It is like a whole thing. And you learn a lot of it as you're doing it.
Yeah.
I was on the road, pandemic notwithstanding, I was on the road for about 5 years. So I learned a lot through.
But yeah, there's a lot of lessons in that time. Yeah, for sure. We also, we neglected to say, you're currently performing on Broadway in Hell's Kitchen.
Yes.
For about another week or so, though, before it closes on Broadway. Just wanted to put that in there because we didn't mention it off the top. So another kind of behind the scenes type question. Do you have any like pinch me moments? Like, oh boy, I guess I know the answer to that after that reaction.
Yeah, I mean, I read this in your, Mark was very, very kind and sent me a little pre-brief of topics that we would talk about. And when I read this, it's like, I was thinking about it, because one of the very cool things about doing this as a profession, and one of the reasons why I love it so much, for better or for worse, tying it back to the psyche conversation and like, are we okay? Is that it's ever changing. It's never mundane. There's always something new to be had, and like everything is temporary. And like Mark said, I'm currently in Hell's Kitchen on Broadway, which is the Alicia Keys musical. And it's about to close on Broadway. And so it's just kind of a testament to like, I've had this really, really amazing job for the last like year and a half or so that I've been in the production on Broadway, and everything is temporary. And so there's a lot of fear and craziness and overwhelm in that, of like, oh my God, now I have to find another job that I just worked so hard to get this job and do this job and sustain this job. And now I'm going to, start all over. But it's exciting because there's always newness, there's always freshness. And so that kind of, I was thinking about that in tandem with the pinch me moment, because I absolutely have had, every time I get a new job, it's like, oh my God, I just worked so hard. I just went through the audition process. I wanted this. I dreamed about this, and it's happening. And like, that's a pinch me moment. And there's going to be so many more of those to come, which is really, really exciting on the offhand of like, oh my God, I'm losing my job. What's going to happen? I have to, what? There's still going to be stuff to look forward to. And then also in that, with doing the job, it's like, it's so exciting to mount a new show and perform it for the first time. And, whether you're in one city, sitting there, like a New York or a Chicago or a Toronto, or places that might sustain long running shows like that, you're getting to share it with new people every single night, and everyone's having their own experience and their own takeaway. And that can be a pinch me moment depending on like who's in the audience. When you go to a new city on tour and a city is experiencing something for the first time, that's a pinch me moment. Working with people, working with people who you've admired, and like, a pinch me moment was certainly like singing Alicia Keys music for Alicia Keys. That was definitely like a did I just sing No One? Like I just sang No One, like a hit record for Alicia Keys. Like she was there and then she gave me the job. Like that's a pinch me moment.
Yeah.
The first time that she ever saw me perform the show on, because then like that's another, it's just kind of like there's so much to be had. So like short answer, yes, I've had several many pinch me moments. I can't, necessarily pinpoint just one because there's a lot of riches to be had there. And the really, really cool thing is that I know that they're going to keep coming because I'll get to keep working on new projects that, whether they currently exist or not, maybe it's something new that, we've never even heard about before. And it's like, that's a pinch me moment, working with people who you've admired and kind of been a fan of from afar is like that's been a thing in Hell's Kitchen as well, of like the people who I've gotten to work alongside, meeting someone in rehearsal for the first time and being like, hi, I'm Kelsee. I'm going to do a couple scenes and songs with you every single night. But also I've been a fan of yours for a very, very long time. And I'm excited to just meet you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. This is all insanely fascinating to me. Okay. You have to write a book.
Yeah, someday. I think that's a goal, to like do a memoir or something. And it's funny, like every now and then, if there's a crazy story on a crazy day or whatever, I'll be texting my mom like, okay, you'll never believe what just happened, and she'll write back and she'll be like, okay, can't wait to read this chapter in your memoir.
Yeah,
I'm like,
well, sign me up. I'm buying it for sure. I mean, again, like, so we've talked to you on Crescendo, we've talked to you here, like we're at the hours point now of talking, you and I talking about like stuff in your career, and I am still insanely fascinated by all these pieces of the puzzle. So I just think like we're gonna have to have you back every year in some capacity because like I want the update of like what happens.
Yeah, because that's the thing. There's always going to be newness. It's not just like, okay, we're here. Like I'm not just like in Hell's Kitchen and like that's it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's, same with like the people who did Hamilton. It's not like Lin-Manuel Miranda did Hamilton and he's like, all right, I'm done. No, right. Like he has this crazy creative urge thing in his brain, and he's gonna keep creating, he's gonna keep going, he's gonna keep experiencing. And I think that we're all kind of in that proverbial boat to some degree.
And that's what I love about your answer on the pinch me question, because I'm thinking it's going to be like, well, I met this person, I met this person, I met this person. And that wasn't. And I really appreciate your, kind of looking holistically at your career and your life in a sense of it's, I'm doing what I dreamed of doing.
Yeah.
And all of these things that are going to be coming, before we started the interview, we were talking about, that the show's ending. I'm like, I would just be in this, I'd be a wreck.
Yeah.
But you're like, this is an opportunity.
Yeah. Awesome. And it is hard. It comes back to the mindset and the psyche part though too. It's like, how are you resilient? How do you survive if this is what you're going to go into? And there's just a lot of acceptance, I think, involved. It's like shows closing, sadly, is kind of, it's inevitable. And there's a lot of, just like any sort of form of grief, there are different levels of processing. We got a couple weeks ago, we got our closing notice, and it's like, dang, that's really sad. The show's gonna close and we're all gonna lose our jobs. That's what that means. And then you kind of, you go through the cycles of grief. Maybe you're angry, maybe you're, whatever. But all in all, it just kind of, it's a lesson in the fact that it really is all temporary. And we all knew that when we chose this as a profession, when we auditioned for this job, when we chose this job and started coming, when I booked Hell's Kitchen in November 2024, I had no idea how long I would, I hoped that I was given a contract. The term of my contract when I first joined was 52 weeks, was a year. Mm-hmm. And it's like, great, I have job security for a year, but do I hope it runs the full year. that I am contracted to do the show. It might not. And, because of that, I have a wonderful team of agents and managers who, are always on the lookout for opportunities and auditions and things for me. And like, that is the part that never really stops, even when you do have a job of high commercial success and long running success. But yeah, it's kind of like, okay, you get a little bit of breathing room. Like, okay, I got this job, and lucky for me, I did make that 52-week term and then some of my contract. But they're just kind of, it needs to be like an acceptance of like, and call it cynical, call it realistic, but it's just kind of like we all know that this is a part of it, and being proud of what we've created is a really, really beautiful, sustainable part of the experience. And knowing that we'll get to do that again with another project and another team in the future is part of the opportunity perspective, for sure.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all of this today. I mean, it's been absolutely fascinating. And I think this is like one of these ones that I'm going to tell people, like, go back and listen to it several times, because there are life lessons in here that you have shared that I think if we all think a little deeply about, we can apply to our lives as we look at your experience. So Kelsee, thanks for taking some time to talk with us today.
Of course, my pleasure. It's resilience, it's preparedness, it's showing up, it's belief in yourself. And yes, those lessons are everywhere, for sure.
I love it. And then she summarizes it with the notes for us at the end. I love it.
Okay.
All right. Kelsee, thanks for being with us. And thank you all for being with us on this edition of PMEA's Take Note Podcast. We'll see you next time.